How's it going, everyone? Today we are going to do something a little bit special and interesting. So I wanted to talk about some of the most key takeaways that I have learned or have been really emphasized in interviewing some of the most successful real estate entrepreneurs and real estate investors that are in my network and that have been on my show. So I wanted to go through these in no particular order and talk about some of the takeaways and what you can learn when reviewing deals or pursuing entrepreneurship or being in business in general. So the first takeaway I want to talk about is in a conversation that we had with Jeremy Roll, which was reading between the lines to verify who you're making a bet on. So when assessing a private real estate investment opportunity, the person you're making a bet on is far more important than the property in which you're investing in, the market or the asset class itself, or any other analytical metric. In fact, in episode 1, Jeremy uses an example to paint the picture that you can invest in one of the most highly desirable markets in the world, such as Beverly Hills, in a 100% occupied building. But if the manager runs the building to the ground, doesn't take care of the issues that are coming up on a day-to-day basis, or even commits fraud or something like that, the investors are going to lose money every single time. So once you realize this, it's important to take the steps to assess who you're dealing with and whether or not they can be the type of person that you want to be making a bet on. So because of this, it's important to review every word of the executive summary as well as review every line of the pro forma in order to kind of read between the lines and make that decision. So for example, if the sponsor or the manager is using phrases like, "We believe the property is currently 9% under market rent, but we didn't bring rates up to market rents in our pro forma in order to be conservative," that would be a good sign, or what Jeremy calls a green flag. Conversely, if the operator is assuming that rental rate increases will be significantly higher than expense rate increases, for example, if the rental rates are increasing by 3% with expense rates only increasing by 1%, without a justification for this, that would be a sign that the sponsor is being aggressive and potentially setting expectations too high, something that would be considered a yellow or a red flag. Now, sometimes it can be justifiable that there's a discrepancy between the rental increases and the expense increases. For example, if you're turning a property from a B-class facility to an A-class facility, or you're doing some kind of renovations or something like that. But that all needs to be substantiated by comps. And then the key there is that once that value add policy is implemented, the rental rates should increase in lockstep with or very close to the expense rates. And if they're not, there needs to be a really good justification for this. So the second point that I wanted to talk about is from a conversation that we had with Ethan Pennar, which is the 10th episode of the podcast, which is that there's really no length that politicians won't go to keep asset values high. In this interview, Ethan mentioned that since 2009, virtually every meeting and conference that he's attended, the predominant question that everyone wanted to ask him was, when will rates rise and how high will they go? And he has maintained that this is the wrong question to be asking, and that a far more likely situation would be that rates do not have a meaningful increase in the next decade or two. He added that if you've anticipated that rates were to increase over the last few years and had invested according to that thesis, you would have been investing incorrectly. And part of his justification for this is due to the incentive structure for politicians. So most notably, it's very difficult to get reelected as an incumbent if your voting base's homes are underwater or have lost significant value during your tenure. So essentially, the political class has two main levers that they can pull to keep asset values high. They have interest rates and debt. And since 2008, it has become clear that they are willing to go to extreme measures and enter completely uncharted territory in order to manipulate these levers in their favor. So for example, the Fed balance sheet increased from $750 million in 2000 to $4 trillion in 2009. And very few people talk about the implications of this and how this may affect the market. More importantly, what is to stop from it going up to $8 trillion or $12 trillion? It's just inconceivable that the politicians wouldn't do everything in their power to keep rates low as possible in order to keep the game going. Of course, there was a lot of people that were in business at the time that had been in business for 30 or 40 years when the recession happened, and many of them missed the rally because they would have never conceived that something like this, essentially completely unlimited printing of money out of thin air, could take place. But now that we've gone through that looking glass, This is something that investors need to take seriously as a real possibility for the future, especially since a high rate environment would most likely cause devastation across the global economy, and no politician wants to be the one who caused that. And this is coming from someone who maintains that interest rates are the single most important determinant of values of all financial assets. If you know who Ethan Pennar is, that he's one of the smartest people when it comes to this particular topic. So hearing someone say that with his background is truly a heavy statement. Now, the third one is actually not from an interview that we conducted, but it's a book I read about 4 weeks ago, which is Grant Cardone's New York Times bestseller, 10X. And the takeaway is consistently taking massive action will result in massive results. In this book, Grant explains that there is one way to ensure your success in life, and it has nothing to do with natural talents, who your parents are, where you were born, or anything like that. He believes that you can achieve great success by constantly taking massive action while preparing mentally to work harder than you ever originally anticipated. He writes that every project that is worth doing and will have a meaningful impact on your life is going to be significantly more challenging, more time-consuming, and will require more resources than you originally anticipate. So because of this, people almost always fall short. They put forth the effort, energy, and resources that they originally anticipated putting forth, and then the result isn't as anticipated. They believe they failed, so they give up and accept that they have not been able to accomplish their goal. But Grant's answer to this is very straightforward. Before you set a goal or draft a business plan or project anything into the future, multiply that goal by 10. Then visualize what it will require to accomplish that 10x result. Write it down in detail. I'm talking about things like time, energy, resources, infrastructure, employees, contractors, everything. Write down the steps it would take to achieve all of those things. And then once you've written out your list of 10x goals, take the action required to accomplish that and don't stop until you've done so. And part of Grant's argument is that even if you only accomplish 50% of your 10x goal, you'll still accomplish 5 times more than you were going to in the first place. Now, part of the real power behind this book is that visualizing what it would require for you to 10x your goals is an incredibly powerful process called mind mapping. Let's say, for example, that you had a goal of purchasing $20 million of real estate next year, which you believe would require 100 investors. So instead of preparing yourself mentally, financially, emotionally to attract that number of investors, consider what it would require to attract 1,000 investors. Now, when you first see that number, it's going to surprise you. It's going to seem very unrealistic, but the more you familiarize yourself with that number, the more realistic and achievable it becomes. Now, don't get me wrong, buying $200 million worth of property is no easy task. But the point is, you are starting to mentally prepare yourself for the work it would require, which is where most people really fall short. And reading this book has significantly impacted my goal setting for the next 1 to 3 years. It's one of the most powerful books I've read, despite the fact that the concept is very straightforward. There's a tremendous amount of studies out there confirming that what you put your mind to will manifest in reality, especially if you're very focused on it. And if you don't believe me, write down your 10x goal and look at it every night before you go to sleep and every morning when you wake up. And you will notice that every day it becomes more and more realistic and achievable because your brain is starting to map it out into reality. So it's definitely a very powerful takeaway. So the fourth takeaway is something that took place in episode 8 with Nikhil Nardhani, and that is there's always staff available that can help you achieve your goals. One of the major mistakes Nikhil and a lot of real estate entrepreneurs make is not removing underperforming staff when it's clear that they aren't going to be able to execute. Now, it's true that everyone deserves a chance, but what a lot of people or managers, sponsors, investors forget is that there is always someone out there that is capable of doing the job efficiently. And this is particularly important if you are investing in distressed assets where the property needs to be turned around as quickly as possible and the turnaround process is significant. One of the reasons that managers are slow to fire staff members is that they don't have a system in place to effectively analyze their staff's performance. So every quarter or every month, you need to be analyzing your staff to ensure that you have the right people in place in order to achieve your long and short-term goals. If there is a change that needs to be effectuated on a property, it's also really important to make sure and follow up and verify that the task is actually completed. There's a lot of times where managers make the mistake of crossing it off the to-do list simply because they have asked an employee to accomplish the task. The reality is the task should never be marked as completed until you have verified via bank statements or financial documents or photographic evidence, something like that. And if you fail to verify, you're going to always be leaving money on the table. Money or time, right? The two most important resources in business. The old adage of slow to hire, quick to fire is really important. When you look back on your career, don't let your regret be that you paid the wrong people for too long, because at the end of the day, it's going to help them in the long run too. There are many people out there that don't know what it takes to deliver excellence because it has never been asked of them before. So sometimes people need to learn what it takes to be involved in a successful real estate company or a company at all. And again, obviously, no one wants to be the bad guy, but it's important to remember that there is always someone out there that's capable of helping you accomplish your goals. So the fifth takeaway is from episode 7 with Peter Fisher, and it's really to make sure to review and understand the distribution schedule of any investment. It's very important because there are several details that can make a significant difference in the outcome of the distributions of any investment, especially over the long term. So here are a few questions that you need to understand the answers to. Is there a preferred return? What is the split above the preferred return? Do cash flows from operations during the hold count as a return of capital and therefore decrease preferred return owed for future quarters? Does the split to the sponsor start once the preferred return is achieved on an annual basis, or do investors need to experience a total return of capital plus the preferred return before a split is implemented? Do unpaid preferred returns accrue without interest, or do they compound at the preferred return rate? In what order is capital returned in the event of a capital event, which is a sale or a refinance? In the event of a refinance, does 100% go to the investor, or is there a split to the sponsor? Now, remember that sponsors and managers, they're not attorneys. I have found many cases in my career where the sponsor, the manager, what they intend is not accurately reflected in the documents. So make sure that everything lines up together and that you have an answer to each of these questions, because the distribution schedule is one of the most important provisions in the operating agreement. The sixth takeaway is from episode 12 with AJ Mara, which is that relationships are the most important part of any hard money loan. AJ is the co-founder of More Financial, and he explained that there are several ways to protect your investment when investing in hard money loans, but the relationships will make or break the deal over the long term. Yes, it is important to check title, pull comps, verify insurance, confirm that the property is in good standing, utilize conservative loan to values, etc. But at the end of the day, it all comes down to your relationship with the borrower. So the first thing you need to verify is the borrower's track record, and to ensure that the track record they provide is accurate. There are many times that More has gone to pull title on properties only to find that the properties claimed by the potential borrower were actually completed by other teams. And they may say things like, I'm a partner in the LLC but not a managing member, and things like that. But when you're talking to borrowers that are using misleading tactics like this, it is a red flag in terms of making a bet on the right person, and you should probably just move on. When establishing who to lend money to, it is really an integrity check more than anything. The way that they handle their business is the way that they handle their contractors, it's the way that they're handled their lenders, etc. So if the borrower's integrity is off, the deal shouldn't be funded regardless of the numbers. AJ believes that one of the reasons that More has had significant success in their business is due to their upfront borrower-focused due diligence process coupled with their servicing strategy, which mandates regular communication with the borrower during all stages of the flip. So More services all of their notes and does not service notes which they do not create. This means they control the entire process. Additionally, it's critical that the borrower has one point of contact during the entire life cycle of the flip. The truth is, when problems come up, that human and relationship element is the reason borrowers will resolve the matter and make sure resolving the matter is at the top of the list. The moment that you remove that human element, borrowers feel like they're dealing with a corporation, and the likelihood of default increases significantly. So make sure that you're establishing a relationship with the borrower. Make sure that the person creating the note is the same team that's servicing the note. And the minute that you create a note and have a third-party servicer service the debt, you're significantly increasing your chances of default. Again, business is just all about relationships. So it may sound easier to outsource the servicing, but make sure that it's all being done in-house by the person that created the debt, and that's the ideal situation. The seventh takeaway is from MC Laubscher of episode 15, where he explains that he operates his entire business from the perspective of abundance rather than scarcity. Most people view the world as if every other person's success somehow detracts from them, and the reality is very much the opposite. What is far more likely the case is that the more successful the people are that are around you, the more successful you will be. So in order to supercharge this, MC goes out of his way to help other entrepreneurs and business owners in any way possible. His podcast, The Cashflow Ninja, is a great example of this. Over the course of the last year, MC has interviewed some of the most successful entrepreneurs in the world, and many of the conversations include very valuable information, all of which he has provided to the public for free. And he has grown his business by leveraging his network and helping out those that he looks up to, which has later resulted in them returning the favor in a variety of ways. And I can relate to this on a lot of levels. The Cashflow Connections podcast has provided information from some of the most successful real estate entrepreneurs in the US. And when I was getting started in real estate, nothing like this existed. And if it had, my learning curve would have drastically changed. If you've listened to podcasts about me talking about how I used to go to 3 to 5 networking events every single week, anywhere within 2.5 hours of LA, I've been to those networking events because that's how I learned in the past. But now that we have the podcast, the reality is I could turn the podcast into a paid service or create a course that costs $1,000. There's many courses out there like that, but I have forgone doing this in exchange for building a solid listener base and helping more people and increasing the sphere of education. In fact, every time I think, man, this is a really high level topic and these questions are really sophisticated and this content is really, really sophisticated, I probably shouldn't be doing this for free. Every time I think that, that's when I know that we're onto something and I ramp up my efforts in order to deliver great content to the listener base, all from this kind of perspective of abundance. This recent conversation with Antonio about underwriting multifamily investments is a great example of that. The fact that he was willing to come on the program to talk in that kind of level of detail for free, and that we were able to provide the content to the listener base for free, is really a staple of this mindset and something that I'm really proud of. So the eighth takeaway is actually from a Lewis Howes interview with Gunnar Lovelace, who is the co-founder of Thrive Market, which is an online retailer of whole food, non-perishable products. Gunnar grew up very poor, and he suffered from some traumatic experiences growing up, and he also dropped out of UC Santa Cruz. When Thrive originally went to raise money from VCs, they were basically just told no. Not, we will call you, not, we will look at your financials and make a decision, nothing, just basically just get out of the office. And after doing a lot of reflecting, it became clear that one of the driving reasons for this was that Gunnar was being inauthentic about who he was during his pitches. Keep in mind, when you're going into meetings with the top VC firms in the country, many of these individuals have Ivy League backgrounds and Wharton MBAs, and that's just not his background, and it made him feel like he couldn't really be himself. But when people see that you're being inauthentic, they sense the inauthenticity, but they don't know what it's coming from. They don't know what's causing it. They don't know that this guy is insecure about growing up on a hippie commune. They just assume the worst. And when they assume the worst, that results in get out of the office. But as soon as Gunnar started becoming more comfortable with who he was and his delivery was becoming more authentic, he started to mention his background in his pitch. And his co-founder, Nick Green, got a perfect score on the SAT, went to Harvard. And so his dynamic, they kind of played with that saying, I'm Tweedledee and Tweedledum. Now, of course, the reality is both of them are incredibly smart, incredibly talented entrepreneurs, but that became kind of their pitch. And when that happened and they started to be more authentic, the money started to really roll in. And in 2016, Thrive Market closed a $111 million Series B. So obviously Thrive has been able to execute, right? And so that's really helped their growth. But at the end of the day, they wouldn't have even gotten to that point if they didn't reevaluate and be more authentic. So be authentic in every communication when you're talking to investors or employees or friends or family members. And that is very practical advice. This doesn't sound like something that's, all you got to do is do this and you're going to have a better life. The reality is, it is some of the most practical advice that you're ever going to get. Every single person listening to this knows that any time that they've been able to be more authentic, be more honest, be more true to themselves, the results have been really positive. So that's kind of the takeaway there. So the ninth takeaway is to make sure to look at the entire financing terms in order to assess whether or not the loan is aggressive or conservative. This is a really important topic in which my learning has changed over the years. Traditionally, when I would see loan terms, which would include 5 years interest only, I would assume that the sponsor was being aggressive in order to supercharge the cash flow during those years rather than pay down debt and further secure the equity position, which would be a more conservative strategy. Well, in episode 4, Jason Post helps clarify why it's important to look at the whole picture when determining whether or not the loan is conservative or not. So for an example, he is taking on a loan with the following terms: 65% loan to value, 10-year term, Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac loan with 5 to 7 years of interest-only financing. Additionally, they will get a decreased rate on the interest due to the lower leverage point, and they will get a further discount on interest because those agencies have a FHA mandate to lend to those types of properties. So cumulatively, this will result in 2x debt service coverage ratio. That means that they have the capacity to pay twice the debt service, which is very conservative. Now, when you look at the whole picture there, you can see that this is a fairly conservative loan with a very high debt service coverage ratio, particularly for something like multifamily. Now, granted, a part of that is because the loan isn't being paid down, but it's important to recognize that the LTV is already significantly lower than it would have been if it was a 75% loan to value loan with amortizing payments that started in year 2 or year 3, for example. And this is something else that Jason mentioned, which is that the key in this part of the cycle is the leverage you are utilizing. So again, it's really important to take a look at the whole picture in order to establish where you are in that scale. So the 10th takeaway is a book I've read a few weeks ago. I've been really crushing a lot of books recently, reading in the morning, reading in the afternoon, getting as much knowledge into my brain as possible. This book is Miracle Mornings by Hal Elrod, who made it a goal of finding out the morning routines of some of the most successful people in the world. After conducting countless interviews and researching endlessly, he realized that he had been consistently getting similar answers and wondered what would happen if he combined the most popular and incorporated all of them into his morning routine. Now, I know what you may be thinking. I'm not a morning person. I can't do this stuff. Well, neither was Hal, nor was I, but this book has significantly changed how my day starts for the better and has significantly impacted my outlook on the next few years, particularly because of some of the strategies, which I'm going to explain momentarily. So each morning, the author suggests that you set your alarm for 30 minutes to an hour earlier than you normally would, stop hitting the snooze button, this is really important, jump out of bed and do the first morning activity that really wakes you up. This is usually something like brushing your teeth, drinking a big glass of water, taking a shower, all of the above, those activities. And once that activity is complete, Hal suggests that you complete each one of what he calls the savers, which is a mnemonic device for remembering the following morning rituals. S for silence, A for affirmations, V for visualization, E for exercise, R for reading, S for scribing. And you can mix and match the order to best suit your preference. So here's an example of my morning routine. So my alarm clock goes off, I jump out of bed, jump in the shower, brush my teeth, drink a glass of water. And then I complete closed eyes meditation for about 40 to 50 breaths. This is my S for silence. The reason I count breaths is I want the time to be limited, but I don't want an alarm going off. And I also want to be able to control when it's over. So if I want to do 40 or 50 or 60 breaths, if I want to take slower breaths to make it last a little bit longer, I can do all of those. Then after this, I journal for about 5 minutes and write what I'm grateful for, as well as my affirmations and what I'm looking forward to accomplishing. Then I put on whatever audiobook I'm currently listening to and go to the gym. This is for exercise. It's usually something similar to 25 push-ups, 10 pull-ups, and 1 set of abs. And this is just really something that's quick, get your heart racing, and if you do this, walk into the gym and leave 3 minutes later, most people are going to think that's your whole routine, which certainly not mine, but it's just really something quick to get your day started. And after that, I have a protein shake with a banana, and my day is started. Now, it's worth mentioning that I'm not a new age, hippy-dippy type of individual at all, but as I mentioned before, visualizations and affirmations and positive thinking, They have all been scientifically proven to carry incredible benefits in terms of health and wellness and success. So think of Olympic athletes, for example. Why do you think that Olympic high jumpers close their eyes and visualize their jump before each attempt? It's to go back to what we were talking about earlier with mind mapping. They're mapping their mind for what's about to take place in reality. And if you don't think this is for you, that's fine. I was a skeptic at first, but try it for 30 days and let me know your thoughts. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? You get a little bit less sleep and you get a lot more accomplished in more efficient process. Well, that will wrap up the 10 things I have learned from some of the most successful people in the real estate game. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode. I know it's kind of a unique structure, but always looking for feedback. So if you thought this was cool, definitely a cool way to spend 30 minutes, get a bunch of high-level content downloaded as quickly as possible in a concise measure. Let me know if you liked it. Shoot me an email at info@cashflowconnections.com or hunterthompson@cashflowconnections.com. Thanks a lot.